안녕하세요. 김재선입니다. 뉴스킨의 시작부터 지금까지 All of the good, None of the bad를 지키고 있는 것이 저에겐 동기부여되는 점입니다. 뉴스킨의 선한 헤리티지를 알면 알수록 감동이 느껴지고 많은 분들과 같이 이 가치를 나누고 싶어요. 그리고 또 한 가지는 앞으로 성장하고 변화하게 될 제 모습을 상상할 때 동기부여가 되는 것 같아요.
How does New Skin empower me and motivate me? It gives me confidence. It gets me going throughout the day. It gets me positive energy that I never thought I had this much in my life. So it gets you focused.
Hi, I'm Kelly Kennedy. I worked as a seafarer and I was eager to explore other opportunities. I prayed to God for another opportunity. He answered my prayer when I found the New Skin products and business opportunity. New Skin empowers me to be a blessing by allowing me to serve my loved ones, to show others that goals can be achieved.
大家好，我是来自中国市场的张如冰。一路以来，我觉得如新给我最大的赋能就是思维方式的成长，更加的包容、乐观、感恩，还有责任和使命感。一生当中，坏事和好事总在不断的交替发生。对我而言，只有让所有的事情变得更好，那样才有意义。所有的人和事的出现，都在锻炼我，让我成长。只有成为更好的自己，才能肩负起更大的责任和使命。让我们一起加油！谢谢。
Hello, New Skin, and welcome to the Empower session of the New Skin Empower You broadcast. Please welcome back, Connie Tang.
Is everybody back? Come on. I want to see you up. Get on up off your butt. Come on, get up off your seats. Are you back? Did you have a good lunch? Did you just wake up from a nap? Were those workshops incredible? Awesome. Can you tell that I'm really hyped up and I'm really excited that you're back? Well, thank you again, and hello, everyone. It is so super hard to believe. We're already at our final general session of the Empower You broadcast, but don't worry, we've got a packed session. And it is an exciting session because we're going to be looking forward into 2022 together. First, I'd like to welcome another group of affiliates who are joining us live. So please welcome the first new brand directors, senior brand directors, executive brand directors, team elite, and circle of excellence affiliates to register for Empower You. Hello, everyone. Hey, how are you? I wish I could high five you all. How wonderful to see you. I'd love to know where you're all joining us from. Come on. Who is from Latin America? ¿Quién está de Argentina, Colombia, Chile, Peru, Mexico? ¿Dónde están? How about Middle East and Africa? Are you out there? Yay! North America, come on, it's still early. It's a Friday night. Where are you? Yes. Southeast Asia and the Pacific region. Where are my Australians from Sydney, New Zealand? Philippines, Malaysia. Yes, Korea and Japan. Are you there? And Greater China. Awesome. So glad that you're all back with us. It's fantastic to have you all here. I see, wait, I just see something right here in the corner of my eye. You all brought your favorite Pharmanex products. I think I see it there. Hold them up. Hold them up. Let me see. Hold up your Yay! I see your favorite Pharmanex products. Oh, I see some great products. I see Life Pack. I see some Youth. I see, oh yeah, I see some, I think I see some, even an eye formula in there. Awesome. Fantastic. I love the variety. I love that you all brought these products to share, but please, everybody else who's not on the screen, can you put in your chat box your favorite Pharmanex product? Share why you love it so everyone can see. And I think everyone around the world would love to know why you love your product as well. So thank you for sharing and participating. It's so appropriate for our Empower session that we have a guest speaker who is all about empowering people and companies. Michael McQueen is a trend forecaster whose research focuses on disruptive social, economic, and demographic trends that affect the way we do business all over the world. His, get this, 9 books over the past 14 years have addressed emerging trends and influences, including how businesses must evolve to remain relevant and for the future, how artificial intelligence and robotics will shape the coming years, and why transparency, trust, and purpose are increasingly essential for businesses. Earlier this year, Michael's book, The New Now, examined the 10 trends that will dominate a post-COVID world and how leaders in organizations like ours can gear up for them. His work is absolutely fascinating, and I know you're going to learn so much from him. So please give him a super warm New Skin welcome, Michael McQueen.
Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from around the globe for this event. Great to be able to spend a couple of minutes with you to essentially wrap up the event and to draw together so many of the threads of what you've heard from the other speakers and the other workshop presentations. Of course, it's been a time of massive change over the last 18 to 24 months, and so many of the recurring themes have been looking at what we've just gone through as a world, as a populace. What does it mean as we look to the future? And that is going to be the focus of my time together in this session, looking at what does the next 3 to 5 years hold, and what are the opportunities for New Skin as a business, and for you personally, as you're looking to lead a team and build a team, where are the opportunities and how do we gear up for those right now? Now, a bit of backstory. I've spent, as a researcher, 17 years looking at trends, technology, where the world is heading, how to get ready for the future. And I've got to tell you, the most fascinating thing about the last 18 to 24 months throughout this pandemic has been to look at how many of the trends that people like me who are in this area of work, things that we thought were 5 to 7 years away, actually materialized in the last 18 months. It has been a fascinating time in terms of seeing a whole lot of technology and trends accelerate rapidly. What we're going to spend our time looking at is where the opportunities lie for New Skin as a business as a result of that. But if we look at this whole theme of acceleration, I think one of the most insightful observations of the COVID pandemic and what it meant for the world and for business particularly was an insight offered to us by a guy named Lauren Padelford. And if you haven't heard of Lauren Padelford before, he's a VP at Shopify, and here's what he said. He said, what COVID did is it acted like a time machine. It brought 2030 forward to 2020. And I reckon that is absolutely true. That is so spot on. There are so many of the things that we thought, again, were 5, 7, 10 years away that came into view over the last 18 months. And if you look at from a very practical perspective, how we've seen the pandemic change the world that we are all living in. I mean, look at the example, for instance, of QR codes. I mean, up until the pandemic, I would not have used a QR code for, I would say, like 5 to 7 years. And this is not a new technology, but it never really reached its potential until all of a sudden around the world we realized we had to use QR codes to check into venues and for contact tracing. All of a sudden you've now got a platform, a technology that every generation knows how to use. And if you look at how this is beginning to change the way brands are engaging with their customers. In fact, I saw a few months ago, I think one of the most brilliant examples of the use of QR codes. This was in the skies above Shanghai, a video streaming company created the world's first airborne QR code. Check out this here. This is 1,500 drones flying in formation with lights attached to create a QR code. This thing just worked like a normal QR code. You could hold your phone up to the sky and scan the code, and what loaded was a marketing message for the new streaming platform that had just been launched the day before. And in fact, at the opening ceremony of the Tokyo Olympics, we saw the same sort of technology. Remember that globe that floated into the arena, and it was of drones in the sky lit up in the very same way. But we've seen this be used in some other really clever ways over the last few months. We're seeing companies realize that QR codes are changing the way that customers are operating their daily lives. I love this example here. This is an example from Kellogg's. And a few months ago, Kellogg's began using QR codes on their packaging. And these are special type of QR codes. You may be able to see them up here. They've actually got little colored squares. And these are for people with vision impairment. So as you're going down the aisle at the grocery store, you can actually hold your phone up to the box of cereal or the whole aisle wall of box of cereals. What will load is actually from the QR code information about that cereal. So any allergic notifications or the ingredients in that cereal, the things that most of us would read on the package, the QR code loads and starts to read out audibly to the person with vision impairment. So there's some brilliant, innovative examples of new technologies that have come online, again, because of the pandemic. You look at a very different industry where we've seen technology really race ahead over the last 18 months, and that is in the automotive industry. Now, a technology I've been watching for a whole lot of years now that we still thought, again, was sort of 5 to 7, even 8 years away, was the whole technology surrounding autonomous or driverless cars. Now, I wonder how you feel about the whole idea of a car that drives itself. You know, would you get into a car without a driver? Would you feel comfortable being in a driverless car and not touching anything, just trusting the technology to drive you from point A to point B? The reality is, for most of us, there's a sense in which we still don't quite trust this technology, but the technology has actually been there for a couple of years. It's incredibly clever. In fact, just before the pandemic, I had the chance to spend some time in Silicon Valley watching some of this technology being trialed by Waymo. So Waymo are Google's driverless car spin-off company. And watching the technology in action, I was stunned at just how clever this stuff is. The biggest barrier to this becoming mainstream was our comfort in using it, but also the willingness of regulators to give this stuff the green light. Now, that changed throughout the pandemic. In fact, just over 12 months ago, this was a news story that many of us didn't pay anywhere near enough attention to throughout 2020. Back in October 2020, get this, regulators in the US gave the green light for the world's first fully autonomous ride-sharing service to begin operating in Phoenix, Arizona. This is huge. In fact, as we are speaking today, there are people getting into cars and going from point A to point B without a driver being involved at all. And if that sounds inconceivable, check out this video here. It'll give you a sense of what's operating right now in Phoenix, Arizona. Have a look on the screen.
Looks like this is our ride.
It's hard to describe what it's like when you hail a car
See us?
and it pulls up with no one behind.
Heading to Costco Wholes.
And along with it, what Waymo hopes is a pandemic selling point.
It's just me and the steering wheel here.
Not having to get into a car with a stranger. Those sensors are the eyes of what Waymo calls the Waymo Driver, a computer that uses 19 cameras, LiDAR, and radar to see what's happening 360 degrees around the car and up to 3 football fields away.
Wow. It flagged a person that's way over there.
It's always paying attention day and night, 360 degrees. It's never drunk. It's never tired. It's never texting.
This is an experience, and it requires a little bit of trust.
But Waymo says this is all the culmination of over 20 billion miles of testing, saying computer simulations consistently show their cars making more life-saving maneuvers than human drivers. But for some, it's a different kind of safety that matters most.
Wouldn't be for like COVID purposes. It would actually be more for like driving alone as a woman late at night, safety. Like that would be my go-to for it.
Waymo hoping to prove safety is its biggest selling point.
Okay, we're accelerating.
Even if no one's behind the wheel.
Now, I don't know about you, but I loved that gross understatement from the journalist here. You know, this requires a little bit of trust, do you think? And I wonder how many of you would actually willingly get into one of these cars if it pulled up right now to pick you up and there was no driver behind the wheel. But I mean, these are just some of the technologies that we've seen accelerate because of the pandemic. And there are others. You know, what we're seeing with Facebook moving into the metaverse space, using augmented and virtual reality, what we're seeing happen with drone delivery services. There's been a lot of really interesting stuff happen over the last 1.5 to 2 years. But if we look at the Nu Skin business specifically and the whole world of direct selling, I want to put it to you right now that there are 3 trends that have converged over the last 2 years, in many cases because of the pandemic, that are creating, it's almost like a perfect storm of opportunity for this business. And if we look at these 3 trends, the question then is, how do we gear up for these trends and make the most of them over the coming few years for you in your business? And the first of these trends is one that I think all of us have experienced over the last 2 years in one way or another, and that has been how the pandemic has forced us to rethink or rework the whole notion of work. How we work, what the office looks like, even how we think about our careers. And it's been interesting, of course, for all of us. It's been a massive learning curve. For many of you, engaging with some of your team members who live at a distance, or with new customers using Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever platform you've used, it's been a real learning curve for all of us to figure out how to do business and life virtually, remotely over the last couple of years. In fact, I love this little video that underscored just how much of a learning curve it's been. I don't know if you've seen this video. This was a lawyer who dialed into a court case in Texas and didn't realize that his Zoom feed had a filter switched on that he didn't know how to turn off. If you haven't seen this video, it's an absolute treat. And if you have seen this video, you'll probably enjoy watching it again. Let's have a quick look on the screen here.
Mr. Ponton, I believe you have a filter turned on in the video settings. You might want to take a look.
Can you hear me, Judge?
I can hear you. I think it's a filter.
It is, and I don't know how to remove it. I've got my assistant here. She's trying to, but I'm prepared to go forward with it. I'm here live. I'm not a cat.
I can see that.
Who would ever have thought that the term "I'm not a cat" would become a trending hashtag in 2021? But that has been the very strange time we've all just lived through. And the question now for all of us is, what does this mean for the work and workplaces, and how daily life looks for all of us after this steep learning curve that we've all gone through to get used to virtual and hybrid? How many things will just go back to the way they were before the pandemic? And there's been some really interesting research done over the last few months by a number of organizations. My favorite research, I think, in terms of how insightful it is, was some stuff done by McKinsey's recently, looking at what employee expectations are as we come out of the pandemic. What was really interesting is they asked employees, and this was a huge sample size globally, if you are forced to go back to the office once the pandemic is over, what will you do? How will you feel about that? And what's interesting is, look at the data on the screen here. It gives you different regions around the world. I wonder in your part of the world what the data up here indicates. But on average, about 30% of people said, if they demand me to go back to the office, I'm out the door. I'm done. They want to look for a change. Now, why is this? Because you've got a whole group of people who, for the first time in their lives, haven't had to stick with normal traditional routines of commuting to the office, sitting at the office, doing a day's work, then going home. You've got a lot of people, particularly young mothers, who've realized the benefit of having flexibility and autonomy, and they don't want to go back to the pre-COVID norm. Now, this is significant because what we're seeing is people are already leaving their roles, and we're seeing some of the things that are motivating this shift that actually create a huge opportunity for you from a business perspective. To give you an idea of how much this is already happening, you may have heard over the last few months a lot of discussion in the business world about the Great Resignation, the number of people who after the pandemic are now looking to radically change their career paths and their jobs. To give you a sense of how significant this is, in August alone, just in the US, we saw 4.3 million Americans leave their jobs. And this is why we call it the Great Resignation. What's interesting is where they are going, and it's not necessarily into other employed roles, not just to get another job. Many of them are actually starting their own businesses. Many of these people who, for the first time in their lives, are thinking, you know what, maybe I do want to call the shots, be autonomous, run my own organization. This is significant. Check this out. Globally, we've seen startup rates jump by 24% over the last 12 months. And what's also playing into this has been a rising trend of what we've often referred to as the gig economy, people working for themselves in itinerant sort of roles. This was something that was still fairly fringe. It wasn't mainstream a few years ago. In fact, back in 2014, only 14% of people were in the gig economy working in those sort of roles. Now today, as a result of the pandemic, it's jumped from 14% to 35%. And get this, the expectation is within a few years, it'll be half of the workplace. Now, this has massive implications in many, many areas. One of the things we're seeing right now is people are open to the idea of having itinerant careers, doing lots of different jobs, but working for themselves. And what's great is, from a Nu Skin perspective, you are an ideal platform to engage this group of people who, for the first time in their lives, are sort of looking up from the traditional expectations of what career was meant to look like and thinking, what could life be? What could life be if I did call the shots? And the beauty of the business opportunity, the Nu Skin business model, is that it is low risk. You're not starting from scratch, and you can get in, and the training is provided. It is a brilliant, almost turnkey operation for someone who wants to get into business for themselves and maintain autonomy and flexibility. Again, these are the things that, because of this reworking of work, That's where the marketplace is at now, and it's a huge opportunity. Right, number 2, the second significant trend that we've seen come together over the last 18 to 24 months, and this is a really interesting one, has been around the priority of personalization. Now, for decades as consumers, we got used to the whole idea that we were treated as groups or segments of the market. So you were sold products or services, or you were promoted products or services because of your gender, or your age, or perhaps where you lived, or what season it was in your part of the country or your part of the world. But we were used to being dealt with as part of a group, part of a herd. That changed in the last little while. One of the reasons that's changed is during the pandemic, many of us began to rely on online businesses in ways we never had before. I mean, just take Amazon, for instance. The growth of Amazon over the last 18 months is truly staggering. And what do Amazon and all the other online companies do? They use data to hyper-personalize everything that you get shown. And so for us, when we go online to Amazon or any number of other online sites that many of us have relied on so heavily throughout the pandemic, we just get things that are very relevant to us as an individual. We are a target market of one. This is massive because now people are expecting this as the norm. In fact, a recent study found that 3/4 of people online, so 75% of online shoppers, expect the entire experience to be personalized. Now, why this is good news from a Nu Skin perspective is at a grassroots level, you already do this. When you're sitting down with someone to talk about the products or the business opportunity, you're already personalizing it. You're customizing it to their needs and their life stage. That's part of what you do as you build the relationship with someone new to the business or the product range. But what's really interesting is seeing how technology is allowing that customization and personalization to be done at scale, and this is significant. In fact, I was doing some strategy work with the leadership team at Procter & Gamble a few months ago, and this is a significant focus for Procter & Gamble right now. The term they use, and I love this term, is mass personalization. Now just let that sink in for a moment. This idea that you can personalize things at a massive scale. And one of the things that's allowing this is technology. And this is what's cool from a Nu Skin perspective. You are at the cutting edge of doing this. In fact, for a number of years now, I've pointed to you as a business for a company that's done this brilliantly. In fact, when I'm doing media interviews or working with other industries and people ask for case studies of personalizing their products or services, I point to you because what you've done is you've created a range of devices that allow beauty to be a personalized experience. I mean, it was no surprise to me when I saw that you were named, the #1 beauty device system globally, and that had been consistently year after year, because this is what you've done brilliantly. You've been at the cutting edge of personalizing the beauty experience. What this means is you are perfectly placed to make the most of where this trend will unfold over the next few years. And I mean, this is just the beginning. In fact, I was reading as part of the research for this session, reading some of the material, what we're seeing in different markets who've been already trialing the Vera app for personalizing the experience of your products. And I've got to tell you, this is brilliant stuff. And it puts you in the box seat to make the most of this opportunity over the next few years, because from a consumer perspective, this is now what the marketplace expects. Personalized, customized products and experiences, and you're already perfectly placed to do just that. Right, number 3. The third significant trend that has really come together over the last 18 months has been what I often refer to as the post-millennial marketplace. Now, for a number of years now, we've talked a lot about millennials as a cohort. Now, they're that group who were born between the early 80s through to the mid to late 1990s. We've talked about them because they were the next generation, the next group coming through that we had to really engage with. Now, can I put it to you that millennials are still a significant cohort we need to understand, but our focus needs to shift to their younger cousins. This is a group called Generation Z or Generation Z, depending on what part of the world you live in. And this Generation Z cohort are a phenomenal opportunity as we look at the next few years. And in the last 2 or 3 years, they've grown up. I mean, they are now entering adulthood. In fact, if we look at who this Generation Z group are, and for some of you, this will be valuable because these are your kids. They're not just your future business. This is your family at home. So who are Generation Z? They're born in the late 90s through to the early 2010s. So that's the cohort. This is a group who have finished school and college and university. They are into the workforce, and many of them have very different attitudes and expectations. In fact, ones that set them up perfectly to be interested in what Nu Skin has to offer. Now, as a cohort, they are 35% of the global population. In some parts of the world, in fact, for many of you where you're dialing in from, we're seeing this group are like upwards of 45% of the population for you locally, a massive cohort and a huge opportunity. What's interesting for them too is that when everything has to happen through their phones, they're a very tech-savvy generation, but there's also I mean, you know this if you're a parent, a focus on, you know, instant gratification. And what I love about the comp plan, what you've set up as a business is a comp plan that is perfectly suited to this group. The fact that you can, you know, from a sharing bonuses perspective, see progress very quickly when you start building a new skin business means for Generation Z, they get that sense that they're already getting runs on the board. That is so vitally important. Now, from a product perspective, though, this is where it gets really exciting too. This is a generation who are dialed into beauty. From a young age, it's on their radar to look after themselves, to look after their skin, and not just the women, increasingly it's the men as well. Now, to give you an idea of how significant this is and how young this is beginning, so if you look at this group, for 3 in 5 of them, they have purchased a beauty product before the age of 14. Again, this is something that for them, it's just a part of their weekly spending budget is beauty products. Now, previous generations were probably waiting till they were older to spend on these products. From a young age, again, this is something they're prioritizing from a spend perspective. And what's interesting is a study actually found that 70% would actually describe themselves as beauty enthusiasts. This is not just something they're casually interested in. Beauty is something that is front of mind. Again, much of it driven by social media and what they've seen on social media over the years. But what do they say? They say they're always looking for the next new thing. What I love about your product range, and I think one of the great opportunities with this Gen Z cohort, is you look at a product like Beauty Focus Collagen Plus, like it is the next new thing. It's a very Instagrammable product. It's a product that's beautifully suited to this Generation Z cohort. So the question is, how do we engage with them? And the first question you've got to look at is, where are they hanging out? This is where it gets interesting because the apps that Generation Z are using are different. In fact, I want to show you right now up on the screen. These are 6 of the most popular apps for Generation Z right now around the world. And I wonder how many of you looking at this screen, maybe you don't even know 1 or 2 or 3 of these apps. These are the moments you start to feel old because you're like, I don't even know these apps. And this is where this young group, this is where they live their lives. Now, just to give you an idea of what these apps are, you may want to write these down to actually do some research. These are the 6 most commonly used apps with Generation Z right now. And if we're going to really engage with this group, we need to know where they're hanging out, but also know how to communicate with them in a meaningful and relevant way. This is where it gets interesting because have a look on the screen here. These are 6 of the most common emojis that Generation Z are using at the moment. And if you're a parent of this group, you're probably going to want to lean in or maybe even take a photo on your phone of this screen because I want to show you what these emojis mean if you are a Gen Z, because it's very different to if you are an older generation person like me as a millennial. So I look at these on the screen and I would sort of think that the second one from the top there's someone who's got a cold or maybe they've got allergies. I often use this one here, the second from the bottom one, just as my regular smiley emoji. Now, if you're a Generation Z, that's not what these emojis mean. In fact, this is what these emojis mean if you are from this young cohort. And this is important knowledge because you need to know how to use these. Otherwise, you may well communicate something very different to what you meant as you're engaging with the young people, not just on your team, but also from a customer perspective. So we could spend more time looking at some of these trends and the impact they're going to have. The question that I want to spend our time focusing on the minutes we've got left is this question of how do we get ready for these trends? How do we position this business? How do you position your business to be prepared for the opportunities that will present themselves over the next little while? And there are just 3 things I want to touch on very, very quickly in the minutes we've got remaining together. The first is this: we need to think tribe, not technology. And this is so important. And really listen carefully here because at the moment there are so many fantastic apps out there that allow you to build a business, allow you to connect with customers and people on your team, you know, others in your business who you want to connect with as affiliates. And these apps are brilliant. Use them as tools. But remember, these apps are tools. They are not the end in themselves. What we do in this business, and we've done it for years, is build tribes. Tribes that people feel like they belong, where they feel a greater sense of purpose, where they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves. And this is critically important, by the way, for Generation Z. They're a group who, of course, love technology, but for them, they are desperate to be a part of something. They want to belong. So you've got to focus on building a tribe with this cohort. And the question, of course, is how do you do that in a meaningful way? How do you build the sort of things that make this industry and this business work? Things like trust and affinity. How do you do that in an online environment? And a book I would highly recommend you get a hold of is a book here called The Trust Factor by Paul Zak. And what I love about Paul Zak's work is he looks at the neuroscience of how to build trust and affinity, which are critical in building a tribe, how to do that in a digital environment. He looks at the neuroscience of how we build trust with others. And what's really interesting is he looks at what happens when you actually begin to trust someone, what happens in our bodies. And some of the stuff in this book he looks at is the role of oxytocin. So for instance, if I'm engaging with you and I am just authentic and real and transparent and vulnerable, you will actually have a release of oxytocin, which is the body's social bonding hormone. And the moment that hormone is released, you know, when you get that feel, you talk to someone, it's like, I feel like I just connect with them. We just clicked. That's oxytocin at work. The challenge for all of us as we build tribes in a digital environment using technologies, how do we not lose that? How do we build that sense of intimacy with people and trust and affinity in a digital environment? And I've seen some great examples in the direct selling world of people who are doing this by, gathering small groups together in their lounge room to talk about the products or the business opportunity, and they'll set up a phone and broadcast that to hundreds or thousands of people dialing in. But the trust is there because they get to see the person engage with other human beings and just be real, just be transparent, just be honest. And the power of this is, and the term I often use is scalable intimacy. How do we use these tools not to erode or replace the role of connecting with people, but to amplify that intimacy and that trust? So this is our key challenge over the next few years, is not just to fall back on relying on technology to build our business, but make sure that we are actually using that technology to build a tribe. Okay, number 2. The second key if we're going to gear up for the future that lies ahead is to focus on friction. Now, what is friction? Friction is the stuff that makes it difficult for people to do business with you. Friction is the stuff that makes it complicated and frustrating and difficult and cumbersome and bureaucratic. Now, interestingly, I often refer to friction as being like the barnacles on the hull of a boat. And of course, the longer a boat sits in the water, the more those barnacles gradually build up and they slow the boat down, they weigh the boat down. Friction in a business is exactly the same. And one of the most important keys to have front of mind if we're going to be relevant in the years ahead is to focus on what the customer experience is. Put yourself in a customer's shoes. What is it like to deal with you? What are some of those points of friction? And this can be a fantastic source of innovation if you're paying attention to it. In fact, a colleague of mine named Peter Knight over in the UK, I met a few years ago, who was telling me this great story from some work he'd done with this business here, Costa Coffee, which is the world's second largest coffee chain behind Starbucks. But a few years ago, they were having some challenges as a business. Their per store spend had stagnated or was going backwards. And so they were trying to figure out what was going wrong. And a lot of the business leaders had theories, like maybe it was the price of the coffee or the range of the food, or maybe the decor needed to be updated. They weren't quite sure why things weren't going well in their stores. Now, one of the executive team one day decided to go into downtown London, sit just inside the front doors of one of Costa's busiest outlets just to watch, to get into the customer's shoes. What is it like to do business with us in our cafes? And he noticed something that intrigued him. What he noticed is that every sort of 4th or 5th customer would walk in, look around, buy nothing, order nothing, turn around and walk straight back out the door. And I thought that's a bit odd. But when he kept seeing this happen time and time again, he got so intrigued, he actually followed one of the people out the door who'd not ordered anything and caught up with her outside and said, look, I'm sorry, I'm not a stalker. I'm just curious. I saw you didn't buy anything today. What was that about? What are we missing? And she got all nervous and embarrassed and said, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to cause any offense. But I actually love this cafe. I come here most days. I know the staff, they know my standard coffee order. But the challenge is I've got my laptop with me to do some work and it's almost out of power and all the tables near the PowerPoints have run out of power. And he said, wait, so it wasn't like the price of the coffee or the range of the food. None of those things were contributing factors. She said, no, I just needed a PowerPoint, she said. So he's going back into the cafe, just thinking about the conversation he's had. And you'll love this. He speaks to the barista and said, do you know we're losing customers because we haven't got enough PowerPoints in this place? And the barista said, oh yeah, that happens all the time. The barista knew. Who didn't know? Head office, right? So he goes back to his colleagues at head office, shares this insight. They were all stunned. Over the next 6 months, they doubled the number of PowerPoints. Their per store spend jumped by 21%. Now, that's a big number. I suspect that wasn't all about PowerPoints, but I bet PowerPoints and the increasing number of them in their cafes had a role to play. Why did this make a difference? It dealt with a point of friction. Something that was disappointing and frustrating customers, and until you got down to the customer's level and looked at what was the customer experience like and addressed those points of friction, the business was never going to realize its potential. Now, can I suggest for you, in the online environment, this is vitally important to keep customer or user experience front of mind. And what I love about what you've done as a business is you've made this so simple. You have streamlined the process of online ordering in ways that I'm not seeing many of your competitors doing. In fact, if you look at online ordering, 50% of all online ordering is done using a mobile device, and people are far more likely to abandon their cart. In other words, put a cart together, order some things, but if it's all too complicated, they just give up. And if you look at your technology to do the My Personal Offer feature that allows you to just send a potential customer a bundle or a special discount, they can just 1 or 2 clicks and the order's done. This is brilliant because it deals with those points of friction. It makes it easy to deal with you. You've got to keep this stuff front of mind if we're going to continue to grow in the years ahead. Right, number 3. The third and final key if we're going to gear up for the opportunities that lie ahead is to think revolution, not just evolution. And this is probably the most vital theme that we'll touch on. Because I think one of the biggest traps we can easily fall into in business, particularly when you're in a business like Nu Skin's, where you've had years of success, like a heritage of success, a foundation to build on, the simple trap that's so easy to fall into is to think about innovation and strategy as merely an exercise in evolution, continuous improvement. And there's a place for continuous improvement, but can I put it to you, if you look at just how much change lies ahead, continuous improvement ain't going to cut it. In fact, I love this insight from the former head of the business faculty at San Francisco University. Oren Harari was famous for saying, remember, the electric light never came from the continuous improvement of candles. I love that because it is so true. It did not matter how good you got at making candles. There came a point where a fundamental rethink in how you made light needed to occur. And if you're not careful, so many businesses can fall into the trap of working themselves silly just trying to make a better candle than they did last year without realizing that actually what is required is a revolution, fundamentally rethinking how they do business, how they engage with customers. And you look at an example of what happens when people don't revolutionize their business. I mean, this is what happens with brands like Kodak and BlackBerry and Sears. Brands that got focused on what they were doing well and they just sort of got a bit stuck. They didn't engage in revolution as times changed. And now let's be honest, being revolutionary is difficult, it is risky, it's confronting for a lot of us, particularly if you're used to doing things a certain way, but it is so vitally important. And in fact, just to speak to how difficult this can be, to be really honest, I mean, look at one of the great innovators of our time, Apple, struggled to be revolutionary a few years ago. When they had revolutionized the whole business of music with iTunes, but then they got stuck. They got stuck with an assumption that said customers should need to own the music they listen to. Even if you just buy one song, you've got to still buy that one song. And what happened, of course, is while they were so focused on asset ownership, you had new products come onto the market, new competition like Spotify or Pandora. And they said, don't buy the song, just pay us a monthly fee and stream whatever you like, whenever you like. Now, at the time, Apple largely dismissed this as a fad. It's like, nah, that won't catch on. In fact, there was sort of an assumption this would be like the next Napster. It'd probably be deemed illegal. So they basically didn't respond. They kept focusing on what they were doing well, what had always worked for them. Now, the interesting thing, of course, is this didn't go away. This became the norm. And it took Apple 2 years to realize they had to follow suit. And by the time they launched Apple Music 2 years later, it was a game of catch up, and it's a game that they're still not won. If you look globally right now, this is what the data looks like for Spotify versus Apple Music. Spotify are still winning. Why? Because of this 2-year period where they didn't revolutionize fast enough. If you look at the direct selling world right now, and if you look at particularly the business for Nu Skin, we are on the verge of what I would suggest is the next great revolution in this industry. And it's super exciting for the businesses and the leaders that are ready to jump onto it. But it is going to be a little bit uncertain, a bit risky, but it is something we've got to have front of mind. And I guess the overarching theme of this is what we're seeing happening with social commerce right now. Social commerce is where the game is going to be at over the next few years. To give you a sense of just how quickly this revolution has happened in the last little while. So if you look at the number of brands, so 73% of brands right now are using social commerce to some degree. Many of them are only dabbling with it. Some are really going in big time focusing on this. But in the direct selling world, we've not seen a lot of people really break from the pack and engage with this yet in a meaningful way. Nu Skin could be one of the leaders here, I've got to tell you, right? If you look at consumer acceptance, it's grown 42% in the last year. People are getting used to social commerce just being a natural, normal thing. Now, if you look at the numbers, so at the moment, the global industry for social commerce is about $89 billion. The expectation is within 6 years, it's going to be $700 billion. About 25 to 30% of that will be in the Asia Pacific region. And this is critical because what we're seeing happen right now in Asia, particularly in mainland China, around using social commerce and particularly live stream e-commerce is huge. And those of you who are dialing in from mainstream China, you'd probably know very well just how quickly this trend has taken off over the last couple of years, particularly driven by the pandemic. And I've got to say, in the West, we're not seeing many businesses really getting their heads around what social commerce could look like. This is the revolution. It's on our doorstep. Now, to give you an idea of what's happening in China right now, it's $60 billion last year in annual sales in live stream e-commerce. This is basically someone going live on a streaming platform, giving a product review, talking about a product, and then people, while they're watching the review, a bit like home shopping network on TV, but in social media, they can then click on to order that product. And this is huge. So last year, 39% of the population in China made a purchase using a live stream. 560 million people. That accounts for 9% of all e-commerce trade in China. Now, to give you a sense of just what this means from a dollar perspective currently, we saw a few weeks ago in the lead up to Singles Day, which is the big retailing day in China. Check this guy out here. This one influencer in a 12-hour period sold $2 billion worth of cosmetics. This gives you a sense of just how big this is. And I understand that this requires a bit of a shift in thinking, but it's a huge opportunity. And I guess that's the challenge for all of us. When it comes to revolution, the biggest shift we need to make is in our thinking, is in our mindset. In fact, for those of you who haven't watched the workshop that I recorded for part of this event, I'd encourage you to check that workshop out, because that's where I focus in that workshop is how do we shift our thinking to gear up for revolution, because that's where the game is going to be at. All right, we are almost out of time. What I'll do before we finish up is I'll just pop my details up on the screen. Feel free to reach out. It would be great to stay in touch. I actually send updates every day at about 8:30 in the morning Sydney time, which is where I'm based, with trends, new data that's been released overnight. So if you want to sort of stay in contact, look at some of these trends as they begin to unfold. If you want to scan that QR code, it'll take you to my LinkedIn page. Feel free to reach out and connect on LinkedIn. It'd be great to stay in touch there. There's also a whole lot of details on the website, little video clips and things that might be useful to check out. But the interesting thing that's really valuable, I hope, for many of you is that Nu Skin have actually arranged for all of you to get a free copy of a book that came out a few months ago called The New Now, which looks at what the trends are that have sped up because of COVID and how to get one step ahead of those trends and gear up for a post-COVID world. So if you go to the on-demand section on the homepage of the conference, you'll actually be able to find a link there to download that. So I hope that is useful. There's a lot more in there that'll give you a sense of the trends to keep an eye on, things that we haven't had a chance to focus on in this short session together. But just as we wrap this time together up, at the risk of mixing metaphors, I said that many of these trends were creating a perfect storm of opportunity, but what they're also doing is creating what's almost like the perfect wave. And I don't know how many of you know how to surf, but if you know how to surf, one of the key skills in surfing is to spot the wave while it's building on the horizon. And you've got to keep your eye on the horizon to know when the wave is forming. But it's all about timing. You've got to know when to paddle out and get into position. And you've got to be in exactly the right place for when that wave begins to form and then crest. You've got to jump on and you can ride the wave. If you move too early, you'll actually be too far out past where the wave crests. If you wait too long or don't move at all, you'll just get bowled over by the wave as it begins to crash. I want to put it to you, the timing is now to take advantage of some of these trends. Like the Nu Skin business at a technology and product perspective level, it is ready. Like it is the perfect timing to really accelerate this business over the next few years. And I hope what we've talked about in these last few minutes will give you a sense of what you need to do to get ready for what lies ahead, to begin paddling out, getting in position, getting prepared for the opportunities that will shape the next few years. So I hope that was useful. It'd be great to stay in touch with a number of you. I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks so much. Cheers.